Michael Hayes pushed open the glass door of Rosie's diner, the familiar chime announcing his arrival like it had every Friday evening for the past 2 years. The scent of coffee and home-cooked meals wrapped around him like a worn blanket, comforting yet tinged with melancholy. "Your usual table, Mike?" Rosie called from behind the counter, her kind eyes already showing she knew the answer. He nodded, managing a small smile as he made his way to the corner booth by the window. The red vinyl seat squeaked as he slid in, and he carefully placed his worn leather jacket on the opposite bench, the side where Sarah used to sit. Friday nights had been their sacred time. No matter how chaotic the week became with work deadlines and family obligations, Friday was theirs. They discovered this diner on their third date, charmed by its retro aesthetic and Rosie's grandmother's meatloaf recipe. Even after they married, even after their daughter Emma was born, they protected these evenings fiercely. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4, 6 months, maybe 8 if they were lucky. They got 9. Michael traced the edge of the laminated menu he'd long since memorized, his finger following patterns Sarah's hand used to make when she was thinking.
Emma was at her best friend's house tonight for a sleepover, her first in months.
At 14, she was finally starting to smile again, to be a teenager instead of a girl frozen in grief. He was grateful for that, even as it meant eating alone. Coffee, black, and the meatloaf special. Rosie appeared with a pot, not waiting for confirmation before filling his cup. "You know me too well. 2 years of Fridays will do that." She patted his shoulder gently. "Sarah would be glad you still come, you know. She loved this place almost as much as she loved you." After Rosie left, Michael stared out the window at the darkening street. A light rain had begun to fall, painting the glass with streaks that caught the neon lights. He should feel pathetic, he supposed. A 42-year-old man eating alone at the same diner every week, clinging to memories like life preservers. But this was where he felt closest to her, where he could almost hear her laugh, see her rolling her eyes at his terrible jokes. The diner was unusually crowded tonight. A family celebration occupied the large center table, their joy bouncing off the walls. A young couple sat at the counter, sharing a milkshake with 2 straws like something out of a movie. Several other booths were filled with the usual Friday crowd. Elderly regulars, teenagers escaping their houses, workers grabbing a late dinner. That's when he noticed her. A woman stood near the entrance, holding the hand of a boy who looked about 7 or 8. She had auburn hair pulled into a messy ponytail, and even from across the room, Michael could see the exhaustion etched into her features. The boy tugged at her sleeve, pointing excitedly at the dessert display case. But she was scanning the diner with growing concern. Every table was taken. Rosie approached them, shaking her head apologetically and gesturing at the full restaurant. The woman's shoulders sagged, and she bent down to explain something to her son. The boy's face fell, his excitement dissolving into disappointment. Michael found himself raising his hand before he'd fully decided to do it. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice carrying across the diner's ambient noise. The woman turned, confused. "There's room here, if you don't mind sharing." The woman hesitated, clearly weighing the awkwardness of sitting with a stranger against her son's growing disappointment. The boy, however, had no such reservations. "Can we, Mom, please?" After a moment, she smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her tired face. "If you're sure you don't mind." "I insist." Michael moved his jacket to his own side, making room. As they approached, Michael wondered what Sarah would think of this spontaneous invitation. But somehow, looking at the woman's grateful expression and the boy's renewed excitement, he thought she'd approve. Sarah had never liked seeing people unhappy, especially children. "Thank you so much," the woman said as they slid into the opposite bench. "I'm Rachel, and this is my son, Benny." "Michael, nice to meet you both." He couldn't know it then, but this simple act of kindness would change everything. Benny bounced in his seat with the uncontainable energy only a child possesses, his eyes wide as he studied the menu like it held the secrets of the universe. Rachel placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, a practiced motion meant to channel some of that enthusiasm into stillness. "What do you recommend?" she asked Michael, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed at odds with the exhaustion around her eyes. "The meatloaf is legendary, Rosie's grandmother's recipe. But if you're feeling adventurous, the chicken pot pie is phenomenal on rainy nights." "I want pancakes," Benny announced. "Can I have pancakes for dinner, Mom?" Rachel opened her mouth, likely to redirect him toward something more dinner appropriate, but Michael jumped in. They make them here all day, and between you and me, he leaned closer conspiratorially. They're better at dinner than breakfast. Something about the evening shift cook. She adds a secret ingredient. Benny's eyes lit up, and Rachel gave Michael a look that was equal parts grateful and amused. Well, I guess pancakes it is, then. When Rosie came to take their order, she raised an eyebrow at the new seating arrangement, but said nothing, though Michael caught the slight smile tugging at her lips. After she left and comfortable silence settled over the table, punctuated by Benny's humming and the ambient noise of the busy diner. So do you come here often? Rachel asked, then immediately cringed. Sorry, that sounded like a terrible pickup line. I just meant... Michael laughed, genuinely laughed, and it surprised him. Every Friday, actually. It's kind of a tradition. That's nice. We're new to the tradition thing. We just moved to the neighborhood 3 weeks ago, and Benny's been begging to try this place since he saw the neon sign. She ruffled her son's hair affectionately. He's obsessed with anything that lights up. It's so cool, Benny confirmed. It looks like something from Back to the Future. Have you seen Back to the Future? Only about 100 times, Michael said. My daughter Emma loves those movies. She's 14 now, thinks she's too cool for family movie nights, but I still catch her watching them when she thinks no one's looking. You have a daughter? Rachel's expression softened. Is she here tonight? Sleepover at a friend's house. First one in a while, so I'm trying not to be the overprotective dad who texts every hour. Oh, I know that struggle. Benny's barely gone for playdates without me hovering nearby like a helicopter. She shook her head ruefully. I keep telling myself I need to give him more independence, but it's terrifying, Michael finished. I get it. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that only parents who'd weathered storms could share. There were stories behind both their protective instincts, histories written in worry lines and careful watchfulness. Their food arrived, and conversation flowed more easily than Michael had expected. Rachel worked as a graphic designer, freelancing from home so she could be there when Benny got off the school bus. She'd moved here for a fresh start after her divorce finalized, choosing this town because it seemed quiet and safe. Good schools, friendly neighbors, the kind of place where kids could still ride bikes without constant supervision. What about you? She asked. What do you do when you're not keeping Friday traditions alive? I teach high school history. World civilizations, American history, the occasional elective on historical myths and legends. That's amazing. Benny loves history, don't you, honey? Benny looked up from his pancake construction project. He'd been carefully arranging them into a tower with syrup on his chin. I want to be an archaeologist. Like Indiana Jones, but real. That's a great goal, Michael said seriously. You know, we actually have a small historical society museum downtown. They sometimes let students help with cataloging artifacts. If you're interested, I could find out about their youth programs. Rachel's eyes misted slightly. That's incredibly kind of you. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of easy conversation and laughter. Benny told elaborate stories about his stuffed dinosaur collection, each one with names and detailed backstories. Rachel shared her disaster of a first week in the new house, including a flood from a forgotten washing machine and a near miss with a local skunk. Michael found himself telling stories about Emma's early years. Memories he hadn't shared in so long, they felt fresh and new in the telling. When the check came, they argued briefly over who would pay. Michael won by pointing out he'd invited them, though Rachel insisted she'd get it next time. Next time? Michael asked, surprising himself. Rachel paused, then smiled. Well, we need to establish our own Friday tradition, don't we? If you don't mind the company. As they left the diner together, stepping out into the cool, rain-washed evening, Michael realized he felt lighter than he had in months. The guilt came quickly. How could he enjoy himself so much, laugh so easily when Sarah was gone? But beneath the guilt was something else, something he'd forgotten existed. Hope. Same time next week? Rachel asked, Benny's hand in hers. Michael nodded. I'll save you the seat. The following Friday, Michael arrived at the diner 15 minutes early, his heart beating faster than usual. He told himself it was just nerves about breaking his routine, about having company during his sacred time with Sarah's memory. But when Rachel and Benny walked through the door right at 6 o'clock and Benny's face broke into that gap-toothed grin, Michael knew he'd been lying to himself. Mr. Michael. Benny rushed over, his backpack bouncing. "Look what I brought!" From his bag, he produced a worn book about ancient Egypt, its pages marked with countless sticky notes. For the next 20 minutes, while they waited for their food, Benny regaled them with facts about pyramids, mummies, and pharaohs. Rachel tried to rein him in several times, but Michael waved her off. "I'm a history teacher, remember? This is my favorite kind of conversation." As weeks turned into months, Friday dinners became the highlight of Michael's week. The corner booth transformed from a shrine to the past into a bridge to something new. They developed their own traditions. Benny always ordered something different and made Michael guess what he'd chosen before Rosie arrived. Rachel tried whatever pie was on special, rating each one on an elaborate scale she invented. Michael started bringing history trivia questions, awarding imaginary points that Benny tracked in a notebook with intense seriousness. Other aspects of their lives began to intertwine naturally. When Benny's school had a history fair, Michael helped him build a model of the Colosseum, spending 3 Saturdays covered in paint and papier-mâché. When Rachel's laptop crashed right before a major deadline, Michael rushed over with his backup computer and ended up staying to help troubleshoot her design software, something he knew nothing about but learned on the spot. Emma met them in November, the weekend before Thanksgiving. Michael had been nervous about the introduction, unsure how his daughter would react to him spending time with another woman and her child. But Emma and Rachel hit it off immediately, bonding over a shared love of true crime podcasts and vintage fashion. Benny followed Emma around like a puppy, delighted to have an older kid who didn't think he was annoying. "She's really nice, Dad," Emma said that night as they drove home. Then more quietly, "Mom would have liked her." Michael's throat tightened. "You think so?" "Yeah. Mom always said you needed people who made you laugh. Rachel does that." Emma stared out the window at the passing streetlights. "And Benny's sweet. Kind of like having a little brother, but one I can send home." By December, they'd expanded beyond just Friday dinners. There were weekend trips to museums, movie nights at Rachel's house, a disastrous but hilarious attempt at ice skating. Michael found himself thinking about Rachel at odd moments, while grading papers during faculty meetings in the quiet moments before sleep. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she concentrated, how she laughed at his terrible dad jokes without making him feel foolish. The gentle patience she showed Benny, even when she was clearly exhausted. But with these growing feelings came waves of guilt that sometimes threatened to pull him under. One particularly difficult night after Emma had gone to bed, Michael sat in his study staring at his wedding photo. Sarah's smile radiated from the frame, her eyes full of life and promise. "I don't know what I'm doing," he whispered to the photograph. "I don't know if I'm supposed to feel this way." His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Benny keeps asking when we're seeing you next. He wants to show you his new book about Vikings. No pressure, just wanted you to know you've made quite an impression on my little historian." A photo followed. Benny in pajamas, already half asleep but clutching his book, a smile on his peaceful face. Michael stared at the image, then at Sarah's photo, then back again. The guilt was still there, but so was something else, a quiet certainty that Sarah, who had loved him so fiercely and completely, wouldn't want him frozen in grief forever. The next Friday, Rachel noticed he was quieter than usual. After Benny finished eating and got distracted by a handheld game, she reached across the table, her hand hovering near his. "You okay?" Michael looked at her hand, then at her face, concerned, kind, patient. "I'm figuring things out," he said honestly. "It's complicated. It always is." She didn't push, didn't demand explanations. "But for what it's worth, these Fridays have become really important to us, to me. You've brought something back into our lives we didn't even know we were missing." "What's that?" "Joy, simple, uncomplicated joy." She smiled softly. "Well, as uncomplicated as anything can be with an 8-year-old future archaeologist." Michael finally reached out and took her hand. It felt different from Sarah's, smaller, cooler, but it felt right. "These Fridays are important to me too, more than I probably should admit." "Why shouldn't you admit it?" "Because I'm scared," he confessed. "Scared of what it means?" "Scared of moving forward. Scared of being happy again," Rachel finished gently. He nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "Michael, I've been where you are. Different circumstances, but the same fear. When my marriage ended, I thought I'd failed at love, that maybe I wasn't meant for it. Meeting you and Emma has shown me that wasn't true. Sometimes love doesn't look like what we expected. Sometimes it shows up at a diner on a rainy Friday night. Around them, the diner buzzed with life and conversation, but in their corner booth, time seemed suspended. Michael squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement of everything spoken and unspoken between them. Rosie appeared with coffee refills, noticed their joined hands, and smiled knowingly. "About time," she muttered, just loud enough for them to hear. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth, painting the town in shades of green and pink. The diner's door stayed propped open on Friday nights, letting in the scent of blooming flowers and the sounds of evening settling over the neighborhood. Michael's corner booth had become their booth. Rosie no longer asked where he wanted to sit, just led the growing group to their usual spot, because it had become a group now. Emma joined them most Fridays, and sometimes Emma's friend Zoe tagged along. The booth designed for 4 squeezed in 5 with creative seating arrangements and lots of laughter. Michael couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this surrounded by life, by warmth, by family, even if this family had assembled itself in the most unexpected way. It was during one of these crowded, happy Friday nights that Michael realized he'd fallen in love with Rachel. The revelation came not in a dramatic moment, but in something ordinary. Benny had spilled his chocolate milk across the table, and in the chaos of mopping it up, Rachel had laughed, really laughed, her whole face transformed by joy, and Michael felt his heart crack open in a way he'd thought impossible. Not breaking, but expanding, making room for something new without erasing what had been there before. Emma noticed the look on his face. She was perceptive like her mother had been, able to read him like a book. Later, as they walked to his car, she hung back while Rachel and Benny went to theirs. "You love her, don't you?" Emma asked quietly. Michael stopped walking. His daughter stood in the parking lot's yellow light, looking simultaneously 14 and ancient, her expression serious and understanding. "I think I do," he admitted. "Does that bother you?" Emma considered this, chewing her bottom lip the way she did when working through complex emotions. "A year ago, maybe. But Mom's gone, Dad. You can't keep living in the past." Her voice cracked slightly. "I don't want you to be alone forever. I have you. You know what I mean. When I go to college, when I start my own life, I need to know you'll be okay. That you'll have someone." She smiled through tears. "Rachel makes you happy. I can see it. You laugh more. You stopped looking so sad all the time." Michael pulled his daughter into a hug, both of them crying now in the warm spring evening. "Mom told me something," Emma said into his shoulder. "Before she died, she made me promise not to tell you until I thought you were ready to hear it." Michael pulled back, looking at his daughter's face. "What did she say?" "She said that love doesn't run out, that her loving you didn't mean you couldn't love someone else someday. She said," Emma took a shaky breath, "she said you had too much love in you to keep it locked away forever, and that she hoped someday you'd find someone who made you want to share it again." The words hit Michael like a wave, and he had to sit down on the curb, his legs suddenly unable to hold him. Sarah had known, had given her blessing years before he even met Rachel. "She loved you so much, Dad. But she loved you enough to want you to be happy, even after she was gone." Over the next few weeks, Michael worked up the courage to tell Rachel how he felt. He planned elaborate scenarios: a romantic dinner at a fancy restaurant, a walk in the park at sunset, a grand gesture worthy of a movie. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It was a Tuesday, not their Friday, when Rachel called him in tears. Her ex-husband had filed for full custody of Benny, claiming she was unstable and unable to provide a proper home. The papers had arrived that morning full of lies and distortions, painting her as neglectful and irresponsible. Michael was at her door within 20 minutes. He found her at her kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents, mascara-stained tears on her cheeks. Benny was at school, unaware of the storm gathering around him. "I can't lose him, Michael. He's everything. And Derek knows that. He's doing this to hurt me, to punish me for leaving." Her voice broke. "What if they believe him? What if I lose my son?" Without thinking, Michael knelt beside her chair and took her face in his hands. "You're not going to lose him. You're an incredible mother, and anyone who spends 5 minutes with you and Benny can see how much you love each other. We'll fight this. We'll get you the best lawyer, and I'll testify if needed, and Emma will too. You're not alone in this. Why? Rachel whispered. Why are you doing all this for us? And there it was. The moment he'd been planning for weeks, arriving without fanfare or preparation. Because I love you, Michael said simply. I love you, and I love Benny. I love how you make everything feel possible again. I love your terrible singing in the car and how you always order too much food, and your ridiculous pie rating system. I love how patient you are with Benny's endless questions and how kind you've been to Emma. I love that you've reminded me what it feels like to look forward instead of back. Rachel stared at him, fresh tears streaming down her face. Michael, I know this is terrible timing. I know you have 1,000 things to worry about right now, but I need you to know that whatever happens, whatever you're facing, you're not facing it alone. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Rachel pulled him up and kissed him, a kiss that tasted of salt and coffee and relief and promise. When they broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. I love you too, she said. I've loved you since that first Friday when you saved us from a disappointed 8-year-old and his pancake dreams. I've been terrified to say it, terrified of what it might mean, but I love you. They held each other in her kitchen as morning light streamed through the windows. Two broken people who'd found a way to be whole together. The custody battle was fierce but short-lived. Once Derek's lawyer actually investigated his claims, they found them baseless, built on jealousy rather than fact. Rachel's stable home, her thriving career, her son's happiness and excellent school performance all spoke louder than bitter accusations. Michael's testimony about witnessing their relationship, about Benny's well-being and Rachel's devoted parenting, helped seal the case. The judge ruled in Rachel's favor, and Derek's petition was dismissed. As an unexpected consequence, the proceedings revealed Derek's own instability, resulting in his visitation being restructured and supervised. Benny, who'd been aware something was wrong but protected from the worst of it, was simply relieved things could go back to normal. That Friday, the first after the custody hearing, felt different. The relief was palpable as they gathered in their usual booth. Benny chattered endlessly about a new dinosaur exhibit opening at the Natural History Museum. Emma showed Rachel pictures from her school's spring formal. The normalcy of it was beautiful. After dinner, as they lingered over coffee and Benny's ice cream sundae, Rachel reached for Michael's hand across the table. I've been thinking, she said, about traditions and fresh starts and what we're building here. Michael squeezed her hand, waiting. These Friday dinners started as an accident, a crowded diner and a generous stranger. But they've become the foundation of something real, something I want to keep building. Emma and Benny had gone quiet, sensing something important was happening. I want that too, Michael said. I'm not trying to replace what you had, Rachel continued softly. I could never be Sarah and I wouldn't want to try. But maybe we can build something new, something that honors where we've been while embracing where we're going. Michael felt his eyes burning. Sarah told Emma something before she died. She said love doesn't run out, that I had too much of it to keep locked away forever. He looked around the table at these 3 people who'd become his world. She was right. Loving you doesn't diminish what I had with her. It's just proof that the heart is bigger than we think it is. Is this like when you give speeches in class? Benny asked, making everyone laugh through their tears. Kind of, Michael admitted. But this one's important, buddy. What I'm trying to say is that I'd like us to be a family, not just Friday dinner friends, but something more permanent. He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. He'd been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Inside were 2 rings, an engagement ring for Rachel and a simple band for Benny. Rachel, I know this is unconventional. I know we've only known each other for 8 months. But I'm 42 years old and I've learned that life is too short to wait for perfect timing. Will you marry me? Rachel's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming freely now. Yes, God, yes, Michael turned to Benny. And Benny, I know I can't replace your dad and I'm not trying to, but I'd be honored to be your stepdad if that's okay with you. To help with homework and museum trips and teaching you to drive someday, to be someone you can count on. Always. Benny looked at the ring, then at his mother, then at Michael with those serious 8-year-old eyes. Will you still do Friday trivia? Every single week. And help me with my history projects? Absolutely. And can Emma be my sister? Emma laughed and ruffled his hair. Deal, Squirt. Benny nodded decisively. Okay then. Yes. The diner erupted in applause. Apparently their moment hadn't been as private as they'd thought. Rosie appeared with a bottle of sparkling cider and plastic champagne flutes. "Finally," she declared, filling their glasses. "I've been watching this love story unfold for months. About time someone made it official." "You knew?" Michael asked. "Honey, everyone knew. You two weren't as subtle as you thought." She raised her own glass. "To new beginnings and second chances. To family, however it forms. And to Friday nights at Rosie's Diner where magic happens." They clinked glasses. This unlikely family bound together by chance and choice. By loss and love, by the courage to start over. Later, as they stood in the parking lot saying goodnight, Michael pulled Rachel close. The spring air was sweet with the promise of summer, and the diner's neon sign cast colorful shadows across the pavement. "I was so lost," he whispered into her hair. "For so long I was just going through the motions, keeping traditions alive because I didn't know how to live anymore." "And now?" Rachel asked, looking up at him. "Now I know that love doesn't end, it transforms, it grows. It makes room for new people without erasing the old ones." He glanced over at Emma and Benny, who were engaged in an animated conversation about summer plans. "Sarah will always be part of me, part of Emma, part of our story. But you've given me permission to write new chapters." "We've given each other that," Rachel corrected. "I was drowning too, Michael. Trying to be everything to Benny while forgetting to be anything for myself. You reminded me that I deserve happiness, that we both do." They married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the diner, surrounded by close friends and family. Emma was the maid of honor, Benny the ring bearer. Rosie catered naturally, and insisted on making her legendary meatloaf as part of the reception menu. The corner booth was decorated with flowers, and in the celebration photos, you could see 4 people who'd found their way home to each other. Years later, when people asked how they met, Michael always told the story the same way. "I was sitting alone in a diner holding on to the past, and then a beautiful woman asked if she and her son could join me. She didn't know it, but she was offering me a future." "He's being dramatic," Rachel would interject with a smile. "I just needed a table. It was destiny." Benny would insist, now a teenager with his father's seriousness and his mother's warmth. "It was love," Emma would say quietly, speaking the simple truth that had brought them all together. And every Friday night, without fail, they returned to Rosie's Diner. They sat in their corner, oath now officially marked with a small brass plaque reading "The Hayes Family" table, and they laughed and told stories and built memories on top of memories. Because love, Michael learned, doesn't replace what came before. It doesn't erase or diminish. It simply expands, making room for new joy while honoring old sorrows. It transforms grief into gratitude and loneliness into belonging. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it starts with a stranger asking, "Mind if we join you?" The answer, Michael knew now, should always be yes.